The theme of body horror, which until now has been veiled, erupts into full nightmare in Chapter 7. Aiden's attraction for his party companion is idealized, with its physical elements being partitioned and hidden somewhere in his haunted house. This entity has followed him inside on the coattails of his rental tux. But was she already on the premises?
Chapter 7. The Mousetrap. Aiden stepped into the house in a perplexed state. Static and snow on the television screen heralded the arrival of electricity. His start in seeing it was checked on remembering Bray's earlier failed attempt at channel surfing. The bluish glow nonetheless threw a new disquieting architecture on the walls, one upwardly shifting in dark columns of shadow. The sofa lamp was turned on to reestablish equanimity, but the bulb was faulty and sputtered out. Simultaneously, a brief image jumped across the flickering TV screen. He approached the set with apprehension and tried to raise a better signal. The same tantalizing snippet of an image darted away with each click of the dial. Seizing the channel knob firmly, it was turned with measured pressure in hopes of stitching together a complete picture. But the incremental bursts were too short to yield anything intelligible. The resident gave up
and switched off the nuisance,
unwittingly plunging the house into darkness. He moved toward Cloak Steps in a vague heading and found in its bower a heaven big enough to take on incandescent feelings. He had neither the will nor conceit to call exclusively his own. Pulling himself along the banister, more by reverie than careful deliberation, he rounded the corner at the top to enter his bedroom. A second lamp was attempted on the night table, and succeeding where before he failed, light produced the edge of the wavering bed.
Indescribably tired,
Aiden removed the tuxedo and sat for a time staring at his socked feet. He was shot through with more emotion than he could bear, and between the dizzying alcohol and nameless woman,
it was doubtful sleep would come because he welcomed it. A glance at the table clock revealed a flashing 12.
It would need to be reset in a moment of greater sobriety than was presently had. He muddled a minute or two around the room before peering out the drapes.
The view,
like the previous evening, was black but for the same beacon of a window across the way. Pondering the coincidence, the resident spied what must have been the same woman moving back and forth in front of curtains. She resembled a blurry microorganism until she dropped, pointedly, into an austere chair. The occasion of happening upon her felt scripted, like a performance had been delayed on his account. It was only when she reached over to turn off a lamp that the voyeur realized she was nude. At the precise second her apartment went dark, the light behind Aiden succumbed to the impression. He skirted a bedpost and hit the rim of the lampshade. Shaking fingers turned up a loose bulb in the socket. The sleep medication sat on the same table as the rekindled lamp. He sobered briefly long enough to park the barricade chair used the night before in front of the bedroom door, after returning from the bathroom and swallowing a pill with water from the tap. Nothing was left between him and begrudged sleep, except the lamp switch. His careening head had no thought but the pillow, yet in looking through the dark veil, the red eye on the camcorder was spotted hovering over him. Like the television downstairs, it was inadvertently switched on when there was no electricity. If the machine was programmed to shut itself off on reaching the end of the tape, then perhaps power was only recently restored. Aiden tried to crawl out of his sinkhole to deal with the complication, but merely succeeded in knocking the water glass off the table. As the glass rolled away on the floor, he blearily saw it, and even thought about retrieving it, but was too mired in drowsiness to care. It was directly banking in the hallway and dropping down stair steps, which was impossible given the obstacle of the blocking chair. Because logic offered no barrier, the descent stretched far beyond the point where the glass should have hit bottom, and with each additional pop on hollow wooden tread, An echo grew. Vertigo compelled the sleeper to look to his feet for assurance. They carried him along a footpath between two shadowy buildings. He pushed into an open courtyard under a radiant cerulean sky and was safely planted among Purcell College's Gothic architecture. Fragrant flowers bloomed everywhere.
Jeweled pansies, daffodils, and deep carmine mallows.
Unsure of his destination, the dreamer walked unhurriedly to savor a rush of feeling. It was romantic sentiment remembered from youth, where manifestations of natural beauty produced in him a languid, catatonic state.
A shadow soon set a chill at his back, and each time it lurched in his direction, he turned to find a spire blocking the sun. Undeterred, he ambled on until this mysterious companion swooped down to set a riotous breeze loose in the trees. Sycamore branches heaved. Their bat-like leaves nearly took flight. This eruption did not mask entirely the thump of a teetering stone gargoyle perched on a nearby ledge. With pollen-dusted brow, the grotesque loomed indifferently over the commotion, though Aiden sensed another pair of eyes, higher up, intent on his movements.
He tried inconspicuously to glimpse what followed him, to find its image in one of the many windows of buildings, but its form always molded itself to an expectation, like a low cloud. His gaze again dropped to his feet, uncomprehending jagged leaf shadows crowding the path.
Crescent-shaped slivers of dimming light separated them,
indicating through their mosaic that a solar eclipse fast approached. Something else merited attention in a faraway window. A bird trapped in blinds. Or was it a beckoning hand? By the time the searcher reached the ledge, the disturbance had evaporated. Nevertheless, a little girl was some way fixed in the dark, transparent panes and nestled in the growing womb-like shadow. The solar eclipse, nearing totality, coaxed the last acre of campus under its umbra.
Aiden turned into its twilight to see the wino materialize under a towering oak. The pirate swung his metal detector like the stick of a sightless man, yet he peered into the sudden starry sky with frightful expression. He could see it. The dreamer, wanting to see it too, reached down to pick up a rock and hurled it into the air.
The empty drinking glass struck the bottom of the stairs. Its shattering defined the outer edge of an event and also a faint cry. Unaware he had been asleep, Aiden glanced at the flashing 12 on his clock. He tried to close his eyes again, but light from the open doorway caught in his lashes like splinters. The chair had scooted forward, nearly to the middle of the room, and revealed how the lamp downstairs was trying to come back on.
To his greater consternation, the Daedalus Monet painting now rested against the baseboard in the hall floor.
The resident threw off his covers with newfound sobriety just when the living room lamp resubmitted to darkness. He crept to the doorway and discovered, to more dismay, glass shards underfoot. The unfastened attic door creaked from a cold draft above, leading him to surmise that a gust from the open skylight shot down to unhook the painting and shatter its glass cover. Yet nothing so straightforward explained the repositioned chair.
Aiden braved the second staircase.
Switching on his studio light, a stab of icy air greeted him with more lamentable news. Loose schematics, drawings unknown to him, blew over the floor. The suitcase discovered earlier that evening had toppled from the edge of his worktable to unleash a whirlwind of ashes and papers. The skylight was hurriedly closed and the spilled contents examined. Charred pieces of old canvases composed most of the debris, but there was also a twine-bound bundle of blueprints, which appeared to have tumbled from the lid compartment of the case. Given the original occupant of the house was a professor of design at the college, this was likely work of his. Why documents of historical value to the school should be so casually mislaid was curious.
Being too sleepy to deal with the mess,
the tenant brushed off the stack and returned it to the suitcase. The loose pages could wait until morning.
Handfuls of cinders were also hastily heaped into the lower compartment.
This unearthed a piece of unscorched paper materially different from the schematics. The handwriting was the same.
Here sleeps sublimity, the eternal feminine. Daedalus Monet.
The peculiar proclamation was replaced with everything else, and the lid clasped shut. The make-do urn was interred in an out-of-the-way corner of the studio before heading back to the door. Aiden switched off the light behind him and glanced down the multiplying stairs. The fickle lamplight again flickered in the living room. A faint, indistinct voice accompanied it. Instantly the light faded, as did the summons, but not before leaving the indelible impression of a figure's shadow on the floor.
The mortified man scanned the dim room below, what little of it he could see, and listened for footsteps. He spied a cloak or white gown flung over an armchair, or believed some lingering aspect of luminescence clung to the downstairs upholstery. This must have been his mysterious companion from the party, who followed him in and hid downstairs while he prepared for bed. Did she intend a midnight assignation? A surprise? The suddenness of this proposition was more troubling than any notion of a ghost. Aiden knew she was the tipsier of the two, so it was probable she signaled him with the faulty lamp switch in a childish attempt to rouse him from bed. When this failed, a skirmish was made upstairs in search of his bedroom, where she bumped the blocked door and knocked the painting off the wall. Embarrassment left her no choice but to bungle her way back downstairs. Perhaps she believed that, in a house so large as this, he lived in a shared residence or dormitory. It was something a college woman would be accustomed to in these matters, although there could be little clandestinity where she knocked things off walls. He was left in fitful doubt of this reasoning some seconds later. No pitter-patter of mismatched shoes or bare feet took to the stair treads. No giggle, which by now he would have readily identified, rose to meet him. He strained to recast the situation and concluded it was all an unfortunate confluence where an unfamiliar house, faulty wires, and a chance speaker calling from the open courtyard outside inspired the worst speculation. These excellent deductions notwithstanding, his curiosity was insufficient to send him downstairs to fuss with the lamp or to confront a drunken woman, so he returned to his bedroom. More out of fright than a precaution against sleepwalking, the chair was again propped against the closed door, and he crawled into bed. The attitude of his body in the still warm sheets made him feel like he never left the comfort of them. A moment was spared for the looming camcorder. Its red eye still glowed, but it had made no sound in passing. Perhaps the tape had jammed. Prudence recommended switching it off, but this was a task left too late. His narrowing gaze stayed fixed on the slit under the door, where light from downstairs continued to shamble. The irksome lamp eventually succumbed to the defect of its connection, and after a while, this welcome development reinforced the belief that whatever spirits had been afoot in the house were settled for the night. The reassuring silence eased him back to the edge of sleep, and the surrounding shadows, hesitant at first, began to drift in and out of his failing eyes. There was nothing to stop his descent except the idea of a dress in a downstairs chair. He could picture her snatching it up in defeat and sending its static electricity like a white conflagration crackling across the dark living room floor rug. She had done as much in brushing his pants leg in the foyer when she secretly followed him in to the house. The thought invariably provoked the uncooperative television from its sleep. Its snowy white screen reignited and billowed as if made out of satin itself. Aiden turned on the bed to escape the specter, not wanting one bad dream to provide the spine for another. But the light flashed again in the sill, and a rattle of the loose glass doorknob worked on his last nerve. What might have been a bump of fingers was certainly another mischievous draft. Convinced the wind succeeded in prying open the studio skylight again, the somnambulist was determined to sink back into a semblance of sleep. He drifted down into a hollowed-out place where only his breathing marked it in any sensate way. His thoughts, perhaps his bare-bone awareness, were empty of content in anticipation of a partition falling away. The door inched forward. The sun from the earlier eclipse peeked out from behind the moon. Sickle-shaped bits of light dropped from the bedpost and crepitated over the coverlet and sheets. From his vantage, they looked like tumbling wafers of ash and offered more heat than illumination. Black bodies cleaved shadows around the bed, but did not relinquish their anonymity, where they consumed the sleeper in a fire. At last, the elusive television image was emblazoned on his mind. A cocked mousetrap! The loud crack drew Aiden back to the threshold of consciousness. A mousetrap beneath the bed had tripped. The creature's agony was insufferable to hear. There was no end to the torment as trap and mouse flopped over the floorboards. Then, with lightning speed, the ruckus intensified. The rodent was abruptly huge, as big as a man, and tumbling violently against the bed frame and springs. The vibrations became so strong, so fast, that Aiden feared the molecules in his body would fly apart. Paralyzed, his breathing was excruciatingly thin, not deep enough for a cry. The sleeper gazed up in a cold sweat to find the noisy camcorder had rewound and shut itself off. He reached over, quaking to the core, and switched on the lamp. After a few tense seconds, he assured himself it had only been another nightmare, so climbed to his feet to stir the oxygen in his head. He had no idea how long he had been standing there. Raising a foot, he was almost certain the ground still pounded against the bottom of it. His legs pushed him forward, or at least wheeled him in that direction. Grabbing a bedpost for support, a check was made under the bedskirt. No mousetrap was seen. Only the anathematized smoke alarm, ripped from the ceiling the night before, met his groping fingers. This discovery at least reinforced his sanity, as did the undisturbed chair. Regardless, trepidation compelled him to nudge aside the barricading piece of furniture, crack the bedroom door, and leverage a peek. The hallway was dark. No breeze emanated from the second flight of stairs. Mustering courage, Aiden flipped on the hallway light, which proved to work in relay with the switch in the attic. Though the studio door above him whined, no one stood near it. Bare footprints, however, led down from the top step. He saw them only because of their deposits of cinders, so believed they were his footprints after traipsing through the spilled contents of the suitcase. This was sound logic as far as it went, but these prints did not travel down the hall to his room, but turned into the guest room along the same wall. This elicited a shudder, and then sobering dread to suppose the diverging tracks were his in a sleepwalking trance. Aiden entered the second bedroom and turned on its bedside lamp. This offered light for the secret passageway discovered earlier that morning. Nothing was seen in it at first, and then, just at the juncture that penetrated the rear of his bedroom closet, a wooden chair stood blocking the way. It was not unlike the one used to wedge his bedroom door. The bedside lamp was moved to an outlet near the closet and set in the floor. Cinder footprints proceeded in this direction and perhaps went no further than the chair. He had assumed these tracks were his, yet slenderer arches supplied these outlines. Aiden braved to reenact these steps and approached the orphaned chair. One last footprint was planted in its seat. Immediately over it, studs disappeared into murky tears of cobwebs, leaving no obstruction to block view of another crawl space between the second floor and attic. He stood beside the chair and called timidly into the opening. "Hello?" The heavy air denied him both an echo and a reply. Removing the chair to the guest room, the resident closed off all doors behind him and hurried downstairs to unplug the sofa lamp. With no wish to provoke his ghost further, he scampered back upstairs to the hall light switch. Bumping was heard in the wall, which could only come from the connecting passageway. By removing the chair, his home invader was denied a means to climb down from the crawl space. Were this the young woman, he could not leave her trapped between floors. Panicking, Aiden returned to the second bedroom and stepped into its closet, where the orphan chair no longer blocked the narrow confine. A single leg hung down from the rupture in the timber studs. For the briefest moment, the murky light convinced him that this was his amorous companion giving up her hiding place. Her lower torso dangled quite defenseless, with no device to shield her from his gaze. His eyesight improved, but this was a costly delay. This leg, white, blotched, and boneless, swung like the cord chain of a ceiling light fixture over the spot where the chair had been. Its ankle and foot groped vainly to locate the seat. Aiden stumbled back over prints he could no longer arrange in his mind, and unwittingly struck the lamp still in the floor behind him. This sent it toppling out of the closet doorway. The last of its light scattered like pearls from a broken necklace in every direction. Terrified, he raced to his room, rebarricaded the door, and crawled into bed, shunning its covers. His palpitations were too pronounced to lie still, so he sat, fretted, and listened to the ceiling for the bony pads of unshoed feet. A darker silence lay siege to the house. Daybreak was less than an hour away, yet no precursor to it lay outside. The sky over his bed was black and shallow, and kept his fear, like a child sharing his pillow, close. The chair seized where the jamming door convulsed. Light pulsed in its seal, and worked in tandem to the failing table lamp. It tossed the dark shapes of spindly chair legs to the far wall. They spidered to the corners, and then over the bed like sable ink to betray not 4, but 6 limbs in silhouette. Aiden leaned into the lamp to hasten the end of his nightmare. It spun off the table with a crash. The cracked face of a woman swallowed the ceiling. Her disconsolate eyes billowed to catch the dying filament of the bulb. Bedposts became her seething teeth.
"Give me the child."
The scorching words ejected him violently from the bed, leaving him glaring at the clock, not the bed lamp, in the floor beside him. It flashed 12. A blinding light now flooded the room, as if the giant uncovered the house in an instant. One abandoned quarter of the shadow remained in the bedroom doorway. It spoke.
"I need you downstairs."
Aiden squinted through the glare of full daylight. The dislodged chair was now pushed free of the doorway. He gasped to understand it. "What?" The policeman was insistent.
"Hello, Mr. Gage. I need you downstairs."
Aiden swings between joy and crisis frequently. He has not yet had time to process the momentous Halloween party, when he is besieged by 2 nightmares, one consigned to night, while the other greets him on waking. He visits Jacques to compare notes the next day, where both artists question each other's relationship to sanity. Chapter 8. Chaos. Aiden rose unsteadily and returned the clock to the night table, inadvertently kicking the toppled water glass. It rolled to where the police officer stood. The man explained his presence in the house.
"Sorry, Mr. Gage, but your back door was open. We couldn't get an answer."
Aiden fumbled for his slippers. "Is there a problem?"
"If you come downstairs, sir, I will explain."
The tenant followed the police officer downstairs to where another officer waited. The scream of a child emanating from the television met the men at the foot of the steps. A boisterous kiddie program was in progress. The flickering light that began his nightmare the night before had not been the lamp going off and on, but, as he feared, the television set. The police officer picked up where he left off.
An abduction occurred in the early hours of the morning.
"Abduction?"
The caretaker's child,
he continued.
She appears to have been taken from her bedroom.
The second officer chimed in.
Did you see or hear anything unusual during the evening?
Aiden barely sensed his words. "I heard something, but it was a picture falling off the wall." The officer glanced at the noisy television.
Do you always leave your TV on while you sleep?
"The switch is faulty."
Your door was open when we came onto the property.
The other man injected.
Would you mind if we had a look round?
"Of course not."
One officer checked the rooms off the staircases while the second returned to the kitchen.
Aiden glared numbly at the television in their absence, watching a magician make 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, take turns sticking their hand into one end of a cloaked box, so to guess its hidden contents by touch. The first boy screamed, which made the second boy scream all the more when it was his turn.
The officers converged in front of the screen where the senior-looking fellow spoke.
Thank you for your time. We may need to talk to you again later.
Mired in his quandary, the resident did not answer. He rose to unplug the TV once the men left. The children still stood beside the black box, but in his haste to remove the source of irritation, he failed to note if the little girl remained in their company. Aiden returned upstairs and staggered through a chain of impossible events. His acquaintance with the girl involved him in a circumstance and not the substance of her life. This fine distinction rang hollow. The reclusive bachelor preferred dipping vicariously into the lives of others, but the feelings elicited had little expression beyond this. His emotions were like poltergeists, unaccustomed to using doors, which meant they were frequently ethereal, but never will-less.
After an indeterminable while, he sought to escape his ache and fiddled with the clock. The blinking 12 was permanently affixed to its cracked face. In the same desultory manner, he turned to dressing himself and discovered a cut on the bottom of his right foot. It was proof he left the bed at some point to step in glass shards, but no footprints, either in the corridor or guest room, were found. Perhaps the persistent attic draft dispersed the ashes, although just as many things were left buried in the night as were carried back.
Aiden returned downstairs to fetch a broom,
and deemed it best to leave the fallen painting where it was against the baseboard. After sweeping up the shards, the videotape from the camcorder was carried downstairs with the dustbin and, in passing, placed on top of the VCR. As with the hall painting, it was left to collect dust. The painter forewent breakfast. He walked in the direction of Jacques' neighborhood with a rental tuxedo slung over his shoulder. Little attention was paid to the whirling leaves overhead. This commotion nevertheless loosened a few thoughts.
The nightmare stayed with him,
and he was convinced that its abrupt conclusion at his bedroom door involved the flashlight-bearing intruder, or at least this presence became the police officer. Yet how could it be daylight on one side of the door and nighttime on the other? And then there was the mysterious suitcase, which he had not revisited since waking, and would not address in any hour before sunset. Knocking on the trailer door produced a low moan. Jacques peeked out like a red-haired troll from under a toadstool. A smudge of face paint had survived a tussle with a pillow. He offered the painter no salutation on turning to scratch the crotch of his briefs. Aiden placed the borrowed tux over a stack of videos.
Sorry to wake you,
I've been up for a while,
croaked Jacques. The visitor made a pass at small talk. It was quite a party last night. The dwarf's mood was darker than what could be accounted for in a simple hangover. An official-looking letter bearing a school's insignia lay on the mattress beside him. He stumbled out of a fog to relay.
I just received a phone call from a friend. They found Moses dead on a construction site late yesterday.
Moses?
Moses Harbinger,
He explained.
an old wino who hung out on campus.
The guy with the metal detector? Jacques' expression softened with an anecdote.
I once heard him tell a kid that childhood cancer was caused by space dust, and that dead pets weren't allowed into heaven.
Aiden nodded. We had a similar conversation.
He started out as a painter here, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
Jacques picked up the letter and crumpled it.
This town has a way of being unkind to alumni who stick around too long. I guess that's why people like me want to stay in school for as long as possible, to put off the truth that the world has no use for us.
The wadded paper was tossed under the bed among his encrusted Kleenex specimens.
I don't know what I'm going to do about funding for school next year,
He complained.
My part-time job won't cut it.
Sympathy was not a natural fit for the visitor. The performance artist broadened the topic.
Do you ever feel like being an artist will make you lose your marbles?
Aiden deflected. I think it's an occupational hazard. I'm sure OSHA has guidelines on it. Jacques stayed in his dreary vein.
Moses may have been off his rocker, but he was more engaged than most people in this town.
The painter was struck by the paradox. When you're an artist, you're afraid of having either too much passion or too little. Jacques agreed.
It's the deal you make with the devil, I guess.
Have you ever heard Nietzsche's dictum? Injected the other. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star.
He went nuts, didn't he?
Aiden explained. One day he came to the aid of a horse being flogged in the street and collapsed. He was taken back to his rooms where he wrote several letters. In one he claimed to have attended his own funeral twice.
I suppose there's little daylight between genius and insanity.
It's the deal you make with the devil, as you say. Jacques repelled from the bleak prospect.
I once heard John Nash, the guy from the film A Beautiful Mind, say the trick to not being insane is to pretend you're sane, and then it becomes habit.
The painter worried aloud. My best friend and I feel as long as we can use each other as sounding boards, we're still grounded to sanity. We're each other's canary in a mine shaft.
Unless you both go off the deep end together.
Both men chuckled hesitantly, as if engaged in gallows humor. Jacques, whistling past the graveyard, squatted on a milk crate stool to expand on his point.
But who's to say what sane is? The first time I heard someone talking on a cell phone, I assumed it was a nutcase talking to his radio. I thought to myself, how is it that someone who looks well-groomed, has all his teeth, and in no other regard seems wanting, should find himself talking to a radio on the street like a homeless guy? Of course, it took several incidents like that before I acclimated to the new reality.
Aiden added, at a certain level, sanity is a mutual agreement between participants. The performance artist looked around his dire living arrangement and tinkered with his idea.
When your life is whittled down to the dimensions of a dumpster, you either hit a wall or pretend it's not there. If you want a happy ending, it's best to start with one. tear out all the preceding pages in the sad saga, and reverse engineer from back to front. It's all in perspective. You don't rewrite your history, you reinterpret it. The glass was always half full, even if, up to that point, you chose to concentrate on the empty part. If you change your attitude about the past, then you change your fortune going forward.
Aiden intruded on the logic. Can you do that for yourself? Jacques' brief moment of optimism faded.
If the devil is open to renegotiation, perhaps.
The painter sounded a positive note. But you're right, it's never too late for a new beginning. The little man was now in full retreat.
A new beginning is too much like a happy ending, I'm afraid. It works better on paper than it does in practice. There's always a next day. There's never not a next day.
Feeling the mood wanting to deepen, Aiden looked to the door in a fidget. Jacques could see his eagerness to leave, so rose to be a gracious host.
Thanks for returning the monkey suit.
No, thank you, and for the camcorder.
Did it work?
Aiden sidestepped. What was originally on the tape you gave me?
It was a recording I made of myself last spring on campus. It was a little dark in places, not good enough for my portfolio, but not bad enough to throw away.
Were you dressed as a gargoyle?
Ah, so you watched it.
Aiden smiled, sidestepping again. Was there anything else on the tape? The performance artist shrugged quizzically.
What do you mean?
Aiden was not sure what he meant. Segueing, he asked, Did you see me with a young woman last night? She wore a wedding dress. I didn't catch her name.
That doesn't surprise me,
Jacques answered. Affecting a pose, he pondered his small, grungy window and opined.
Her name is Emma. She works at the coffee house. She's probably there right now. She's one dancing star that's apt to burn, if you get too close.
The painter was notoriously uncurious, where he had a stake in an outcome. He threw the friend another amicable smile before departing. Jacques, Aiden believed, feigned normality by hiding in plain view as a lawn ornament. But surely he only drew attention to himself. This likelihood was betrayed by the graduate student's shrewder observation about some of the townspeople and their persona non grata relationship to the community. If being ignored was what Jacques truly sought, then perhaps being ostracized for being too different would tantamount to the same thing. An unstated dichotomy exists between college and town life, where perpetually young students are set against people like Moses Harbinger, who do not fit in anymore. Such folks stay too long in youth, and, in not leaving at their appointed hour, turn into pumpkins.